What the hell is that smell? Oh, it's you.
Dr. Gerald Whitmore wrinkled his nose. He looked Aaron Cole up and down like something scraped off a shoe.
Security, get this disgusting cockroach out of my sight! This is a research hall, not a homeless shelter!
Aaron didn't move. His eyes stayed on the parchment behind the glass.
I can read that contract, sir.
Whitmore's face went crimson. He slammed his folder down.
6 world-class professors can't crack this. And some stinking black street trash thinks he can. Get out!
Aaron blinked once. Quiet. Steady. But what nobody understood yet, within 72 hours, every expert would stand in dead silence, watching this boy finish what none of them could. 3 weeks earlier, the National Heritage Museum had made an announcement that shook the academic world. A sealed iron box had been recovered from beneath the foundation of a demolished medieval church in northern England. Inside it, preserved in wax and linen, was a land contract dated to 1016 AD, over 1,000 years old, written in a tangle of Anglo-Saxon script, medieval Latin legal clauses, and symbols no one had seen before. The museum called it the Millennium Contract. Historians called it the most important legal document found in a century. And no one on Earth could fully read it. 6 of the world's leading linguists and paleographers had been flown in to decode it. Dr. Gerald Whitmore, chair of medieval studies at Columbia, led the team. He had published more papers on Old English than anyone alive. He had 3 assistants, 2 translators, and custom-built software designed to match letter patterns against known Anglo-Saxon manuscripts. They had been working for 11 days. They had decoded roughly 40%. Progress had stalled 3 days ago. Whitmore blamed the unknown symbols along the margins. His team blamed each other. Aaron Cole had no software, no degree, no desk, no invitation. He had a rusted van parked 2 blocks from the museum's loading dock, a sleeping bag that smelled like engine oil, and 14 books, water-stained, spine-cracked, pages dog-eared, stacked in a milk crate behind the driver's seat. Old English grammars, Latin dictionaries, a handbook on runic inscriptions, a guide to Ogham script he'd found in a dumpster behind the university library. Every night, while the museum went dark and the experts went home, Aaron sat under a streetlight and read. He copied letters onto the back of fast food napkins. He whispered conjugations to himself like prayers. He traced letter shapes on his jeans with his fingertip until the denim wore thin. He had never set foot inside a university, never sat in a classroom past the age of 14. But he could look at a line of 1,000-year-old text and hear the voice behind it, the rhythm, the breath, the intent. The night of the museum's public opening gala, Aaron slipped in through the service entrance behind a catering cart. He wasn't looking for food. He wasn't looking for warmth. He just wanted to see the contract, just once, up close. That was the night everything broke open. The security guard had thrown Aaron out through the service door. He landed on his palms on the wet sidewalk. His knee hit concrete. He didn't make a sound. He sat there for a long time. The museum's lights glowed warm through frosted windows above him. Inside, men in pressed suits were toasting each other over a document they couldn't read. Outside, a black kid with torn sneakers was replaying every line he'd seen through the glass, and understanding all of it. Aaron reached into his pocket and pulled out a stub of yellow chalk. He always carried chalk. It was cheaper than paper, and the sidewalk never ran out. He started writing. First, the Anglo-Saxon characters, the ones that ran across the top of the parchment. He wrote them in neat rows on the concrete. Then, beneath each line, he wrote the translation. Modern English, clean, precise, word by word, clause by clause. His hand moved fast, sure, like someone copying from a textbook only he could see. By the time the sun came up, Aaron had filled a 6-foot stretch of sidewalk with 2 columns, original text on the left, translation on the right. 43 lines, more than what Whitmore's team had produced in 11 days. Eleanor Hayes arrived at 7:15 that morning. She always came early. She liked the quiet before the experts filled the halls with arguments. She saw Aaron first, asleep sitting up, back against the museum wall, chalk dust on his fingers. Then she saw the sidewalk. She stopped walking. Eleanor crouched down. She read the first line, then the second, then the 5th. Her breath caught somewhere around the 12th line, where Aaron had translated a clause that her own team had been arguing about for 3 days. He had gotten it right. Not approximately right, exactly right. Down to the legal nuance of a land transfer verb that existed in only 4 known manuscripts. She looked at the sleeping boy, then back at the chalk, then at the boy again. "Hey," she said softly, "wake up." Aaron's eyes opened instantly, the reflex of someone used to being told to move along. "You wrote this?" He nodded. "Where did you study Old English?" "Nowhere." He rubbed chalk dust off his palm onto his jeans. "Books. Just books." Eleanor was quiet for 10 seconds. Then she said, "Come with me." She brought him through the staff entrance, past the conservation lab, into a small research room at the back of the building. She set a high-resolution printout of the contract's 2nd page in front of him, a section the team hadn't touched yet. "Read it," she said. Aaron leaned forward. His eyes moved across the characters the way a musician's eyes move across a score, not letter by letter, but in phrases, in rhythm. His lips shaped the Old English syllables first. Then he spoke. "This section is a penalty clause. If the landholder fails to maintain the eastern boundary wall within 3 planting seasons, the land reverts to the Church of St. Cuthbert at Durham. The witness list includes a reeve, 2 thanes, and—" He paused, squinting. "And someone whose title I've only seen once before. A Weald Garifa, a forest magistrate. That office was abolished before 1100. Eleanor's hand was trembling. She had spent 2 years studying Anglo-Saxon land law. Everything he said was correct. The Weald Garifa reference alone would have been a publishable discovery. "How long have you been reading texts like this?" she asked. 4 years, maybe 5. I lose track." The door opened behind them. Dr. Whitmore walked in with his morning coffee, 2 assistants trailing behind him. He saw Aaron at the table and froze. "Eleanor." His voice was ice. "What is this?" He translated 43 lines overnight, on the sidewalk, in chalk. Whitmore set his coffee down slowly. "You're not serious." "I am." And he just identified a Weald Garifa reference in the penalty clause on page 2, a detail your team hasn't reached yet. Whitmore looked at Aaron. Aaron looked back. No defiance, no apology, just calm. "You're consulting a homeless kid now, Eleanor?" Whitmore said. "This is a research institution, not a charity project." He turned and walked out. 2 of his assistants followed. But one of them, Dr. Sandra Wells, glanced back at Aaron before the door closed. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The look on her face said enough. Something had just shifted, and everyone in that hallway felt it. Aaron Cole's mother, Denise, had worked as a janitor at Whitfield University for 9 years. She cleaned lecture halls after midnight. She mopped floors where professors walked without seeing her. She emptied trash cans that sometimes held books, damaged copies, outdated editions, volumes with cracked spines that the library deemed unfit for shelves. She never threw those books away. She carried them home in a grocery bag and stacked them on Aaron's nightstand. "Read everything," she told him once, pressing a water-stained Latin grammar into his hands. He was 11. "Don't matter if you don't understand it now. Words don't care who reads them, baby. They answer anyone who asks right." Aaron didn't understand it then, but he opened the book that night, and the night after, and every night for the next 3 years. By 13, he could read basic Latin. Not because anyone taught him, because the book was there, and the quiet was there, and his mother believed he could. That was enough. Denise Cole died when Aaron was 14. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in April, gone by August. 4 months between the first doctor's visit and the last breath. She was 41 years old. There was no life insurance, no savings, no family willing to take in a 14-year-old boy with nothing but a milk crate of old books and a habit of talking to himself in dead languages. Aaron moved into a van he bought for $300 from a church parking lot sale. He kept every book his mother had ever brought home. He added to the collection, from dumpsters, from library discard bins, from free boxes on sidewalks. Old English, Ancient Greek, Norse, Ogham, Gothic, every language that no living person spoke anymore. He read them the way other kids listen to music, for comfort, for escape, for company. Sometimes, late at night, when the streetlight above his van hummed just right, Aaron would read a passage of Old English aloud and swear he could hear his mother's voice underneath the words. Not the meaning, just the sound, the warmth of someone who once believed he was worth teaching. That was the voice he carried into the museum that night. Eleanor didn't ask for permission. She went straight to the museum director. Richard Bennett sat behind his desk with his fingers laced together, listening as Eleanor laid out what she had seen. The chalk on the sidewalk, the penalty clause, the wheeled Jarifa reference. She kept her voice steady, but her hands gave her away. They hadn't stopped shaking since that morning. "You want me to let a homeless teenager sit with 6 of the most respected linguists in the world," Bennett said, "in a room with a priceless artifact. I want you to let him prove what he can do. 1 test, supervised. If he fails, he walks out and nobody mentions it again." Bennett was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "1 chance. That's it." The test was scheduled for 2 o'clock that afternoon. Word traveled fast. By 1:45, every member of Whitmore's team was in the research room. Not because they were curious, because they wanted to watch the kid fail. Whitmore had insisted on setting the test himself. He chose a passage from the contract's 3rd page, one that contained a property boundary description dense with archaic legal terminology. But he didn't give Aaron the original. He gave him a modified version, a photocopy where 3 words had been deliberately altered. Grant had been changed to loan. Perpetual had been swapped with seasonal. And a witness name had been misspelled by a single letter. It was a trap. If Aaron translated the altered version without noticing the changes, it would prove he was guessing, mimicking patterns without real comprehension. Aaron sat down at the table. The room was silent. 8 pairs of eyes watched him. He could feel the weight of every one of them. He looked at the page. His eyes moved left to right, then back again. He picked up the pencil Eleanor had left for him and began to write. 3 minutes passed. 5. 7. Aaron put the pencil down. "The translation is on the right side of the page," he said quietly. Then he pointed to 3 spots on the photocopy. "But these words aren't original. This one, loan, should be grant. The Old English word for to give was used in the original, not the word for to lend. Someone changed it. This one, seasonal, should be perpetual. The suffix construction is wrong for a time-limited term. And this witness name here, it's been misspelled by one letter. That changes it from a bishop to a thane, two completely different people. The room didn't breathe. Whitmore's face drained of color. He had made those changes himself, by hand, 30 minutes before the test. No one else in the room had been told, not even his own team. Dr. Sandra Wells broke the silence. How did you know the words were changed? Aaron looked at her. The ink oxidation wouldn't matter on a photocopy, but the language does. Those words don't fit the grammar of the period. It's like hearing a wrong note in a song you've listened to 1,000 times. You just know. Whitmore stood up. His chair scraped the floor. Lucky guess, he said. His voice was flat, controlled, but his jaw was tight. Even a parrot can mimic sounds it doesn't understand. He walked out. Two of his assistants followed. But Sandra Wells stayed. She pulled a small notebook from her coat pocket and without a word began copying Aaron's translation, letter by letter. Eleanor caught Aaron's eye from across the room. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The look between them said everything. The parrot had just corrected the professor, and everyone in the building knew it. Whitmore moved fast. By the next morning, he had called an emergency meeting with the museum's board of trustees. He arrived in his best suit. He brought a binder of credentials, his own and his team's. He brought printouts of liability policies, insurance clauses, and security protocols. He did not bring Aaron's translation. This is a world-class institution, Whitmore said, standing at the head of the conference table. We have 6 PhDs, 2 translators, and a $250,000 software suite dedicated to this project. And now you're telling me we're sharing resources with a kid who sleeps in a van? 2 board members nodded. A third looked uncomfortable but said nothing. It's not about his ability, Whitmore continued. It's about standards. If word gets out that we let an uncredentialed street kid handle a 1,000-year-old document, every university in the country will pull their partnership, will be a laughingstock. He paused, then added the word he'd been saving. It's a liability. Legally, academically, and, frankly, reputationally. The board voted 5-3. Aaron was to be removed from the project immediately. No further access to the document. No further access to the building. Eleanor argued. Bennett stayed silent. The decision held. By that evening, it was worse. A local news outlet ran a segment titled, "Museum Lets Homeless Teen Handle Priceless Artifact. Experts Outraged." The anchor smirked through the whole piece. Social media picked it up within hours. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. A black street kid reading Latin? Sure. And my dog speaks Mandarin. Fire whoever approved this clown show. This is what happens when you let diversity politics replace actual scholarship. Aaron saw the clip on a phone screen at the bus shelter across the street. A man sitting next to him was watching it and laughing. He didn't know Aaron was the kid in the story. That night, walking back to the van, 3 guys from the block spotted him. One of them had seen the news. "Yo, professor!" The tallest one blocked Aaron's path. "You gonna teach us some Latin tonight?" The other 2 howled with laughter. "Man, sit your broke ass down. You ain't no scholar. You ain't nothing. You live in a van, bro. A van." Aaron walked around them. He didn't respond. He didn't look back. But his jaw was tight and his hands were shaking. Back at the van, Aaron sat in the dark. The 14 books were still in the milk crate. His mother's Latin grammar was on top, the one with the water stain shaped like a half moon on the cover. He held it, but didn't open it. For the first time in 4 years, he thought about stopping. Not reading, not translating, not trying, just stopping. Letting the words go quiet. letting the dead languages stay dead. He thought about his mother, what she would say, whether she'd tell him to fight, or whether she'd hold his face in her hands and say it was okay to rest. He didn't know. He couldn't ask. He put the book down and closed his eyes. At 6 the next morning, there was a knock on the van's window. Aaron opened his eyes. Eleanor Hayes stood outside, breath clouding in the early cold. She didn't say good morning. She didn't say sorry about the board vote. She didn't say anything about the news. She placed a brown envelope on the van's hood and walked away. Aaron opened it. Inside was a high-resolution printout of page 4 of the Millennium Contract, the section no one had attempted yet. In the margin, in Eleanor's handwriting, were 3 words: "Finish what matters." Aaron stared at it for a long time. Then he reached for his chalk. Aaron didn't go back to the museum. He didn't need to. He had the printout, he had his books, and he had 12 hours of daylight before anyone would think to check on him. He worked on the hood of the van, spread the printout flat, weighted the corners with stones, and started with the Anglo-Saxon layer, the one every expert focused on. He translated it in 40 minutes. Clean, complete. Nothing the team hadn't already done on the earlier pages. Then he stopped, because something wasn't right. The decorative border running along the left margin, the part every scholar had dismissed as ornamentation, wasn't decorative at all. Aaron tilted the page sideways. The tiny marks woven into the vine pattern weren't artistic flourishes. They were letters. Old Norse letters. Younger Futhark runes, drawn so small and so carefully into the design that they looked like thorns on a stem. He translated them in an hour. They were a separate set of clauses, terms that applied specifically to the Norse settlers who held the eastern portion of the land. A parallel agreement, hidden inside the art. But that wasn't all. Along the very bottom edge of the parchment, in a strip so narrow it had been catalogued as a water stain, Aaron found a third layer. Ogham script. The ancient alphabet of the Celtic Irish, written in notches so faint they were almost invisible on the photocopy. He held the page up to the sunlight and counted the strokes. It was a blessing. A formal ecclesiastical benediction invoking the protection of St. Columba over the land transfer. The religious seal that made the entire contract sacred and unbreakable under church law. 3 languages, 3 layers, 3 different legal frameworks nested inside a single document. And none of the experts had seen any of it. Aaron sat on the hood of the van and wrote his findings in the margin of the printout. Anglo-Saxon for the English landholders. Old Norse for the Scandinavian settlers. Ogham for the church authority. Each layer addressed a different party, in their own tongue, with their own terms. The contract wasn't bilingual, it was trilingual, and each layer depended on the others. Remove one, and the legal structure collapsed. He numbered the layers. He cross-referenced the clauses. He drew arrows connecting terms that echoed across languages. The same land boundaries described 3 different ways for 3 different peoples who had to share a border and trust a single piece of parchment to keep the peace. By sunset, Aaron had completed what Whitmore's team had spent 2 weeks failing to do. Not because he was smarter, but because he had looked at the whole page, not just the parts that fit inside a textbook. He folded the printout carefully, slid it into the brown envelope, and walked to the museum. The front doors were locked. He went around to the staff entrance. Eleanor was still at her desk. She looked up when he knocked on the glass. Aaron held up the envelope. "It's not 2 languages," he said. "It's 3. And they're all saying different things to different people. That's why your team can't finish. They're reading 1 conversation out of 3. Eleanor took the envelope. She opened it. She read the margin notes in silence for a long time. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. "Do you understand what you've just done?" she whispered. Aaron shrugged. "I just read what was there." "No," Eleanor said. "You just rewritten how we understand medieval law." Eleanor made one phone call that night. Not to the board, not to Bennett, to Oxford. Professor Margaret Sullivan had been the museum's outside academic referee since the Millennium Contract was first announced. She was 71 years old. She had spent 40 years studying Anglo-Saxon legal texts. She had written the definitive reference work on medieval land charters. And she did not tolerate nonsense. She arrived 2 days later. No entourage, no assistants, just a leather briefcase, a pair of reading glasses on a chain, and a look on her face that said she had flown across an ocean and she expected it to be worth her time. Eleanor brought Aaron to the conservation room at 9 in the morning. Sullivan was already seated. She had the original contract under protective glass in front of her, alongside Aaron's margin notes from the printout. She didn't greet him. She didn't shake his hand. She simply pointed to a line on the parchment and said, "Translate." Aaron leaned in. "That's the reversion clause. If the eastern boundary wall isn't maintained within 3 planting seasons, stop." Sullivan held up a finger. "The verb, the one meaning to relinquish. What tense?" "Subjunctive. Conditional. It's a hypothetical obligation, not a direct command." "And the difference matters because it means the penalty only triggers if intent to abandon can be proved, not just neglect, deliberate abandonment. That changes the entire legal weight of the clause." Sullivan took off her glasses. She looked at Aaron for a long time, the kind of look that measures everything and reveals nothing. Then she opened her briefcase, pulled out a separate document, and placed it on the table. It was a page from a 9th century charter held at the Bodleian Library, a passage that had been translated in 1983 by a team Sullivan herself had supervised. "Read line 7, she said. Aaron read it. Then he frowned. "This translation has an error. The verb here doesn't mean to hold. It means to protect. The object is a boundary marker, not a property title. Your team translated it as a possessive clause. It's actually a custodial one." Sullivan's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite shock. Something in between. "That error," she said quietly, "has been published in every major Anglo-Saxon studies textbook for 40 years. I supervised the translation myself. No one, not a single scholar in 4 decades, has caught it." She turned to Eleanor. "Where has this young man been?" "Living in a van 2 blocks from here." Sullivan nodded once. Then she stood, walked to the door, opened it, and addressed the hallway where Whitmore and 2 board members were waiting. "This boy's instinct for dead languages is something I have not encountered in 40 years of teaching at Oxford. His work on this contract is not only valid, it is superior to anything your team has produced. I will be recommending his continued involvement, formally." Whitmore stepped forward. "Instinct isn't scholarship, Margaret." Sullivan looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a dull scalpel. "No, Gerald, but scholarship without instinct is just bookkeeping. And right now, your books don't balance." She closed the door. The night before the public presentation, the museum was empty. Aaron sat alone in the medieval wing. The lights were dimmed to their overnight setting, a low amber glow that made the stone floors look like old gold. The Millennium Contract was in its case 10 feet away, sealed under glass, lit by a single conservation lamp. He hadn't eaten since morning. He wasn't hungry. He was terrified. Tomorrow, he would stand in front of 200 people, scholars, journalists, board members, cameras, and present his translation, the full thing. 3 languages, 3 legal frameworks, 1,000 years of silence, broken by a kid who had never worn a suit. He heard footsteps behind him. Eleanor. She sat down on the bench beside him. She had 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper towels. She handed him one without asking. They ate in silence for a while. "I wasn't always Eleanor Hayes, senior curator," she said eventually. Her voice was quiet, almost private. "I was Elena Haescu, Romanian immigrant, arrived at 22 with an accent so thick my first supervisor told me to stop talking during tours because I was confusing the guests." Aaron looked at her. "I changed my name, softened my vowels, learned to speak like I'd been born here, and I hated myself for it for a long time." She paused. "But I stayed, because the work mattered more than the name." Aaron set down the sandwich. His hands were in his lap. His voice came out smaller than he expected. "My mom used to say that words don't care who reads them, that they answer anyone who asks right." He swallowed. "But what if the people who guard the words won't let you ask?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. She let the question sit in the quiet the way it deserved.
"Then you ask louder,
She said.
not with your voice, with your work."
Aaron's chin trembled. He pressed his lips together hard. Then something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow, quiet cracking. Tears ran down his face. He didn't wipe them. He just let them fall onto the backs of his hands. "I miss her," he said. "I read these languages and sometimes I hear her. Not the words, just the sound of someone who thought I was worth something." Eleanor reached into her jacket pocket. She pulled out a small plastic card and set it on the bench between them. It was a museum staff ID badge. Aaron's name was on it. His photo, taken from the security camera the day of his first test, was in the corner. "You earned this," she said, "and tomorrow you're going to show them why." Aaron picked up the badge. He ran his thumb across his own name. Then he put it in his pocket, close to his chest. The Grand Hall of the National Heritage Museum seated 240 people. By 9 o'clock that morning, every seat was taken. Front row, 6 board members, the museum director, 2 representatives from the British Library, and a cultural attaché from the embassy. Behind them, journalists, historians, graduate students, bloggers, and 3 camera crews. The balcony was standing room only. Someone had set up a live stream. The viewer count was already in the thousands. The Millennium Contract was displayed center stage, under a climate-controlled glass dome, lit from all sides. A high-resolution scan of every page was projected on twin screens flanking the podium. Dr. Gerald Whitmore took the stage first. He wore a charcoal suit and a burgundy tie. His silver hair was combed back. He looked like what authority is supposed to look like. "Good morning," he began. "What you're about to hear represents the combined effort of 6 leading paleographers and computational linguists working over the course of 3 weeks with state-of-the-art pattern recognition software and cross-referenced against every known Anglo-Saxon manuscript in the Western canon." He clicked to his first slide. A dense matrix of letter frequencies. Our methodology began with a corpus analysis of comparable charters from the period. He was 17 minutes into his presentation when he paused for water. He had covered his methodology, his team structure, his software pipeline, and his preliminary findings on the Anglo-Saxon layer. He had not yet begun the actual translation. Aaron was sitting in the back row. He wore the cleanest clothes he owned, a dark shirt Eleanor had bought him the day before, his own jeans, his old sneakers. The staff badge was clipped to his shirt pocket. His hands were flat on his knees. still. Bennett stepped to the microphone after Whitmore's methodology section concluded. Before we proceed to the team's translation findings, the museum would like to invite a second presenter to offer an independent analysis of the contract. Mr. Aaron Cole. The murmur started in the middle rows and spread outward like a wave. Some people turned in their seats. A journalist in the third row whispered to her cameraman. Two professors near the aisle exchanged glances. The camera operators adjusted their angles. Aaron stood up. He walked to the front of the room. 240 pairs of eyes followed him, and not one of them expected what was about to happen. He didn't go to the podium. He walked past it. He walked straight to the glass dome, stopped 18 inches from the original parchment, and turned to face the audience. No notes, no slides, no laptop, no microphone, until Eleanor quietly handed him a wireless clip-on, which he attached to his collar with steady fingers. The document in front of me, Aaron said, is not written in 2 languages. It's written in 3, and each one speaks to a different party. The murmur died. The primary text is Anglo-Saxon, Old English legal prose, consistent with charters from the early 11th century. This is the layer Dr. Whitmore's team has been focused on, and their partial translation of it is largely accurate. He turned to the projected image on the left screen and pointed to the decorative border. But this vine pattern along the left margin isn't decoration. These are Younger Futhark runes, Old Norse, drawn into the design so carefully that they've been cataloged as ornamental art for 1,000 years. They contain a parallel set of clauses. Land use terms address specifically to Norse settlers holding territory east of the boundary line. A sound moved through the audience. Not a gasp, more like the collective inhale of people realizing they've been looking at something wrong their entire careers. Whitmore shifted in his seat. His assistant leaned toward him. He waved her off. Aaron pointed to the bottom edge of the parchment. And here, in what's been cataloged as a water stain, is a third layer. Ogham script, Celtic Irish, an ecclesiastical benediction invoking St. Columba's protection over the land transfer. This is the religious seal that made the contract sacred and unbreakable under church law. Without it, the other 2 layers have no binding legal authority. He paused. He let the silence work. What you're looking at isn't a contract. It's a trilingual treaty. 3 peoples, English, Norse, and Celtic, sharing a single piece of parchment to divide land, define obligations, and keep peace across a border that no longer exists. And until today, only one of those 3 voices had been heard. Then he translated it, all of it, page by page, layer by layer. He started with the Anglo-Saxon text, the property boundaries, the obligations of the landholder, the reversion clauses, the penalty terms, the witness list with their titles and jurisdictions. His voice was steady, unhurried. He read the Old English aloud first, then delivered the modern translation in clean, precise sentences. A historian in the 5th row pulled out a notepad, then another, then 6 more. When he reached the Norse layer, he shifted. His pronunciation changed. The vowels opened, the consonants hardened. The rhythm took on the cadence of a formal legal recitation. He described the land use terms, the grazing rights, the seasonal access provisions that the Norse settlers had negotiated in their own tongue within the same document. Several linguists in the audience leaned forward. One of them was writing so fast, her pen was tearing the page. The Ogham layer came last. Aaron traced the notch patterns in the air as he spoke, describing the benediction structure, the invocation formula, the specific saint referenced, the jurisdictional authority of the church over the secular parties, and the implications for how medieval ecclesiastical power operated across linguistic borders. He explained how the 3 layers interlocked, how removing any one of them collapsed the legal structure of the other two. How this single parchment was, in fact, the earliest known example of a multilingual peace treaty in the British Isles. He finished in 41 minutes. 100% of the contract. 3 languages, 3 legal systems, 1,000 years of meaning, unlocked live in front of the world. Whitmore was still on slide 14 of his methodology deck. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Then Professor Sullivan, seated in the second row, rose from her chair. She began to clap, slowly, deliberately. 1 person joined, then 5, then 20. Then the entire hall was on its feet. The sound swelled and held. It didn't taper off the way polite applause does. It deepened. People were nodding. Some had tears in their eyes. A graduate student in the balcony was recording on her phone with one hand and wiping her face with the other. Aaron stood by the glass dome, the parchment glowing behind him. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He just looked out at the room full of people who had never expected to be standing and waited for the sound to pass. In the front row, Whitmore sat with his hands in his lap. His jaw was locked. His eyes were fixed on the projection screen, where his own unfinished slide deck still glowed. 14 slides out of 46. His methodology wasn't even halfway done. Behind him, Dr. Sandra Wells closed her notebook. She had stopped writing 10 minutes ago. There was nothing left to record. The kid had said everything. The applause didn't stop for nearly 2 minutes. When it finally faded, the room stayed standing. No one sat down. No one reached for their phone. They just waited, as if something had tilted, and they were waiting for the world to settle back. Richard Bennett was the first to move. He walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the audience, then at Aaron, then at the parchment behind the glass. When this museum acquired the Millennium Contract, he said, we believed it would take years to produce a full translation. We assembled what we thought was the finest team available. He paused. We were wrong. Not about the team, but about what finest means. He turned to Aaron. Mr. Cole, the National Heritage Museum will credit you as the lead translator of the Millennium Contract. Your name will appear on every publication, every exhibition label, and every academic reference associated with this document, effective immediately. The room erupted again. Cameras flashed. A journalist in the second row was already typing on her laptop. The live stream comment section was scrolling so fast the words blurred into a single stream of disbelief. Aaron stood still. He nodded once. That was all. Professor Sullivan rose from her seat. She didn't go to the podium. She walked directly to Aaron and stood in front of him. The hall quieted. Mr. Cole, she said, and her voice carried the weight of someone who had spent 4 decades choosing her words with surgical precision. I came here expecting to referee an academic exercise. Instead, I witnessed something I have never seen before, and I suspect I will never see again. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, cream-colored, embossed with the Oxford University crest. This is a formal letter of offer, a full scholarship to the University of Oxford, Faculty of Linguistics, Philology, and Phonetics, specialization in historical languages and medieval legal texts, tuition, housing, living stipend, and research funding, all covered, for as long as you need. She held the letter out to Aaron. He looked at it. His hand didn't move for a long time. Then he took it. His fingers were trembling, not from nerves, from something deeper, something that had been waiting 18 years to be held. I don't know what to say, he said quietly. Then don't say anything yet, Sullivan replied. Just read it tonight. You're good at reading. A ripple of laughter moved through the hall, warm, real, the kind that loosens the tension in a room full of people who had been holding their breath. Then something unexpected happened. Gerald Whitmore stood up. The room noticed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Cameras swung toward him. Eleanor, standing near the side entrance, held her breath. Whitmore walked down the center aisle. His steps were slow, measured. His face was unreadable. He stopped directly in front of Aaron. For 5 seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence pressed against the walls. Then Whitmore extended his hand. "I was wrong," he said. His voice was rough. Not angry, not defeated, just honest, and clearly not used to the shape of those words. "I was wrong about you, about what credentials mean, about who gets to sit at the table." He swallowed. "I owe you an apology, a real one, and I'm giving it now, in front of everyone, because that's where I tried to tear you down." Aaron looked at Whitmore's hand, then at his face. Then he reached out and shook it. The hall exhaled. Someone started clapping again. Then everyone did. But this time it was different. It wasn't applause for a performance. It was something closer to relief. The sound a room makes when something broken gets put back together. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Street Kid decodes what 6 PhDs couldn't. That was the headline that traveled fastest. It hit Twitter first, then Reddit, then the news wires. CNN ran a 2-minute segment before noon. The BBC followed by evening. By midnight, #StreetScholar was trending in 14 countries. The museum's website crashed twice from traffic. A clip of Aaron pointing to the Ogham layer had been viewed 6 million times before the sun came up in London. Comments flooded in from every corner of the world. Teachers, students, janitors, immigrants, single mothers working double shifts. People who had been told they weren't enough by a system, by a boss, by a stranger in a suit, and who saw their own face in a boy with chalk dust on his hands and a van for a home. "This is the story I needed today." That comment appeared 11,000 times in different languages. 3 days after the presentation, Bennett held a press conference in the museum lobby. Behind him, a new wing was being prepared. Fresh paint, new lighting, polished oak floors. A climate-controlled display room designed to house the Millennium Contract permanently. Alongside Aaron's complete trilingual translation, handwritten margin notes and all. The room would also display the original chalk photographs, images Eleanor had taken of Aaron's sidewalk translations that first morning, preserved and framed under glass. The name on the entrance read, "The Coal Wing, Language Without Borders." Aaron stood in front of the sign after everyone else had left. The lobby was empty. The lights were low. He reached up and touched the letters of his own name, the name his mother had given him, printed on a wall that would outlast them both. Then he closed his eyes and whispered something in Old English, so quietly that no one heard it. But if someone had been close enough, they would have recognized the words. A phrase from the contract itself, the Ogham benediction, the blessing that bound 3 peoples to one promise. He was saying it for his mother. Later that week, Dr. Sandra Wells requested a private meeting with Eleanor. She brought her notebook, the one she had been writing in since the first test. "I need to tell you something," Sandra said. She set the notebook on Eleanor's desk. "After that first test, when Aaron identified the altered words, I copied his entire translation. Every line. I sent it to Professor Sullivan that same night." Eleanor stared at her. "You went behind Gerald's back." "I went behind Gerald's back," Sandra confirmed, "because what I saw in that room was real, and I knew if I waited for permission, Gerald would bury it." She paused. "Sullivan flew here because of my email, not because of the museum's invitation. She came because a research assistant broke rank and told the truth. Eleanor looked at the notebook. Page after page of Aaron's words, copied in Sandra's careful handwriting. Evidence of a quiet rebellion that had changed everything. Does Gerald know? He will. I'm going to tell him myself. Sandra picked up the notebook and held it against her chest. Some things need to be said out loud, even when it costs you. She walked out. Eleanor sat alone in her office for a long time, looking at the empty space on her desk where the notebook had been. Then she smiled, not a wide smile, not a relieved one, the kind of smile that comes when you realize the story was bigger than you thought, and that more people chose to be brave than you knew. Aaron Cole left for Oxford on a Tuesday morning in September. Eleanor drove him to the airport. The van had been donated to a local youth shelter, along with everything in it except the milk crate of books. That he carried with him. 14 volumes, water-stained, spine-cracked. Worth nothing on a shelf and everything in the world to the boy who had learned to hear the dead speak through them. His mother's Latin grammar was on top, the one with the half-moon water stain on the cover. He hadn't let it out of his reach since the day she died. At the terminal, Eleanor handed him a small box. Inside was a framed photograph, the chalk on the sidewalk, taken that first morning. 43 lines of Anglo-Saxon and their translation, written in yellow on gray concrete by an 18-year-old boy who had nowhere to live and no one to impress. I took this before the rain came, Eleanor said. I almost didn't. I'm glad I did. Aaron held the frame with both hands. He looked at it the way someone looks at a photograph of a place they can never go back to. Not because it's gone, but because they've outgrown it. Thank you, he said, for the envelope, for the badge, for believing me before anyone else did. Eleanor shook her head. I didn't believe you. I saw you. There's a difference. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. Aaron picked up his bag, tucked the milk crate under one arm, and walked through the gate without looking back. But before the airport, before the suitcase and the boarding pass and the new life waiting on the other side of the Atlantic, there was one last thing he did. The night before he left, Aaron went back to the sidewalk in front of the museum, the same stretch of concrete where he had written his first translation in chalk. It had been washed away weeks ago by rain and foot traffic, nothing left but clean, gray stone. He knelt down. He pulled out the same stub of yellow chalk, worn down now to the size of a thumbnail. And he wrote one line, not in English, not in Latin, in Old English, the oldest words he knew. The stones remember, so will I. He stood up, he looked at the words, he put the chalk back in his pocket. Then he walked away. Eleanor found the line the next morning. She didn't wash it off. She called the conservation team instead. They photographed it, measured it, and sealed it under a clear resin panel embedded in the sidewalk. It's still there today. A single line of Old English, written in yellow chalk, by a boy who taught himself to read the voices of the dead. Preserved in front of a museum that almost turned him away. 2 months after Aaron arrived at Oxford, the National Heritage Museum announced the creation of a new scholarship fund. It was designed for young people from underserved communities who showed exceptional aptitude for languages, linguistics, or historical studies, regardless of formal education. Applications would be accepted from anyone, anywhere. The fund was named the Denise Cole Memorial Scholarship. Aaron didn't attend the announcement ceremony. He was in a library in Oxford, 3,000 miles away, reading a 9th century charter by lamplight. But Eleanor sent him a photo of the plaque. He saved it on his phone. He never told anyone, but he looked at it every night before he closed his eyes. If you've ever read something that no one else understood and been told you were wrong for understanding it, this story was for you. If you've ever carried knowledge that the world wasn't ready to hear, keep carrying it. Your moment is coming. And when it does, don't whisper. Speak. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the one thing you know, deep down, that nobody else sees yet? I want to hear it. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the oldest contract in that museum wasn't written on parchment. It was the promise a mother made to her son, that words don't care who reads them. They answer anyone who asks right.
6 PhDs, $250,000 software, 3 weeks, 40%. Aaron sleeping in a van with 14 books, finished everything in days. Not because he was smarter, because he saw what everyone else worked past. Here's what the story taught me. Your worth is never decided by the people warding the door. Aaron had no degree, no invitation, no seat at the table, and he delivered what 6 experts couldn't. Knowledge doesn't check the credentials. It answers anyone who does the work. And behind everything was Denise, a janitor who mopped floors where professors never saw her, carried home the books they threw away, and told her son, "Words don't care who reads them, baby." She died at 41, never saw that museum, but her belief built everything that came after. And I need to ask you something real. How many of us are carrying something the world keeps telling us doesn't count? A skill nobody taught you, a knowing you built alone in quiet. Every time you step forward, somebody tells you to sit down. The story is the proof. Patience and resilience always pay off. The truth finds its way to light. Don't sit down. Drop a comment. What's the one thing you know in your bones that nobody has given you credit for? Hit subscribe. We tell their stories every week. Share this with someone who needs it. Because the oldest contract in that museum wasn't on parchment. It was a mother promise. And it still holds.